So welcome to today's workshop. We're going to be going over basic data analysis, graphing, visualizations. So for instance, how to make pie charts and when to make like a bar chart versus a histogram, etc. And at the end, we will do some live demonstrations on using Google Sheets to create charts and calculate statistics like averages, percent change, and range. Okay, so let's get started with SLB introductions. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew. I'm a senior at Canyon Coast Academy, and I'm the chair of outreach for the gsdsef Student Leadership Board. Next, we can go have Kavya introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kavya. I'm a junior at Westview High School. And yeah, I'm part of the outreach team.
James.
Hi, I'm James Ho, and I'm from the Bishop School.
Sivali.
I'm Suvali. I'm a senior at Westview.
Anirudh.
Hi, I'm Anirudh, and I'm a freshman at Mount Carmel High School.
Spencer.
Hi, I'm Spencer. I'm a freshman at SDJ.
Okay, and we have one more volunteer today, Elaine. I don't see her yet, but I'm sure they'll be joining us soon. Okay, let me just check on that real quick. Okay, so some PSAs, the safety screening or basically pre-screening deadline is December 31st. We're giving like over an extra month this year to get this done compared to previous years. So if you don't get it done by then, there's really going to be no kind of deadline extension granted. You'll probably have plenty of time to work on your project screening over winter break or over the weekends. So make sure to get that done because we do want you to be able to participate in a fair. But just for like logistical reasons, we can't have everyone, submitting a week late and then 2 weeks late, or we just have to have it by December 31st. Fair updates will be on the website, so make sure to check that. It will contain updates on like other deadlines, how it's going to work this year. You should also follow our Instagram if you have an account and you're over 13 at gsdsef for updates, new workshop announcements, etc., and also some great science memes curated by our awesome media and communications committee. Also, follow our YouTube channel. You can just look up San Diego Science and Engineering Fair for workshop recordings and also custom-made like screencast tutorials on how to do things like fill out the pre-screening form.
Yeah, amazing. So for today, we're going to be going over exactly what is data.
Sorry. No, we probably won't be doing breakout rooms today just because there's not that many people. Sorry, I interrupt.
Yeah. We'll do like the breakout room information in the main room as well, though. But yeah, so we'll be going over exactly what is data analysis and why we use it. In addition, we'll talk about the importance of like using the right type of graph or analysis for a certain project. Then we'll go over what's the important parts of a good figure and how to use them. And then we'll wrap up with some graphing demonstrations and project-specific peer advising in the main room. But yeah, we'll do everything listed, but probably in the main room. So we're structuring our workshops to better prepare students to write their project notebooks, which are required at this year's fair, and this is a new requirement starting last year. So if you have any questions about the fair format this year, you can please visit our website or ask in the chat, and we'll try to answer all the questions at the end. So first, the last workshop covered how to write the introduction, hypothesis, problem statement, materials, and the methods of your report. Then this workshop will cover how to make figures and discuss your results, which are the middle of your report. And then the next workshop will cover all the finishing touches on a complete report, including the conclusion, appendix, and abstract, which you will write but which goes at the beginning of your notebook. We highly recommend following this structure because it'll help easily put your project notebook together. And for the notebook, there's also an example on the website that follows these different guidelines. So today, as we said before, we're going to be focusing on the results and data portion of your project, which will compile your findings. So some more reminders about organization. remember to organize all your numerical data in tables, and we recommend some softwares such as Excel or Google Sheets because they're easily graphable. And again, if you need specific help on how to do these, we have some videos on YouTube already for Excel and Google Sheets, but then we'll also be using Google Sheets today in our hands-on live demonstration. Okay, sorry, I can't talk. Demonstrations. Okay, so qualitative data such as photos and observations should also be kept neatly so that you can easily refer to them and compare to them. And make sure all of this goes into our appendix because you want to keep it nice and neat. And then lastly, make sure to save all your data and even the pre-trials, even if you think it's useless. You may want it later and come back to it and make some interesting suggestions in your discussion for future work or reasoning behind your experiment.
Here are the basic steps to guide you through data analysis. So first, make sure that your data is all neatly organized and graphed out. And this will help you visualize all your data instead of just simply looking at a spreadsheet. Next, observe your graphs and calculate some general values such as mean, median, and mode to give you some more insight into your data and more easily interpret your findings. And last, discuss what your graphs tell you and relate it back to your problem statement or hypotheses. And something important is that sometimes you can be fooled by simply looking at your spreadsheet data and make an incorrect assumption about your data that you might use not appropriately. And therefore, you should really try to graph these out and visualize it to have a bigger picture of your data. And ultimately, your data should be answering your question or your problem and supporting or disproving your hypothesis. Now, we're going to talk about what makes a figure or graph good. So let's first take a look at these few tables. What would you do to improve these? Well, first of all, this is eyeful, but can anyone look at this and know any conclusions or correlations that are in this data? I guess as an example, in the first table, which one of these costs is related from one to the other, and what kinds of trends are happening? Or in the last graph, what percentage of people scored higher than 2? And these questions, it can be hard to answer in a couple seconds. So that's why it's so crucial to make good tables. And however, this will be needed to, you need to do some work to make these more useful. And the point of this exercise is to show that it's very hard to extrapolate results instantly from charts. And obviously, they're very important for analyzing data, but they cannot tell your audience anything in a couple seconds. And it's also difficult for you to parse out exactly what's going on. Now, we're at labeling a table. The first step to organizing your data is to keeping your tables clean, help you look at it and see something very quickly. And this table is obscure and hard to read, and it's missing a lot of information for anyone to interpret. And one of the key mistakes of many projects is forgetting to label tables and graphs. So be careful to not make these mistakes and be meticulous. Being meticulous can pay off in the long run.
So this is an example of a proper table with all the proper labels and stuff. So first off, you want to make sure that you're having descriptive titles for each column of your data. And you want to make sure that the units are typically next to the title of the column or within each value. So for example, you have Celsius in parentheses at the top of the column, and then you have dollars with every value within the column. And you want to make sure you're using appropriate decimal place numbers for each value. So for example, in money, we count to the hundredths place. And make sure that you have all of these aspects in every table that you use in your appendix. So next, for graphs, you have to make sure that you are making your graph so people can interpret what you're saying. So for this one, you don't have any idea what's being measured or what's the difference or what are even the units on the X and Y axis. So you should be able to be telling a lot about your experiment through these graphs and tables without having to explain too much. So components of a good graph. So you want to make sure that you have a descriptive caption and title, which tells you what your experiment is about, and a legend, so you know what two things you're comparing. Usually you can use different colors, but make sure not to use too many so it's not too much on the eyes and so it's still easy to read. And you want to make sure that your axes have proper units. So labeling is a pretty common mistake. So make sure you're labeling your tables and your graphs, and make sure you have uniformly spaced numbers on your axes as well.
Okay, so here we have a table that compares the temperature with the selling of 3 different items, which are ice cream, hot cocoa, and cake. So one way to graph this would be in a line graph, which is really useful for showing trends or change over time. So an example way to interpret this graph includes looking at the line. So the red line points downwards, so it could be interpreted as temperature increases, the hot cocoa sales decrease. And the ice cream, the blue line, travels upwards, so that could be interpreted as temperature rises, ice cream sales rise. For the yellow line, there doesn't seem to be a change since it's pretty horizontal. So cake sales appear to be temperature independent, or the temperature doesn't affect the cake sales. So this is a different table, which shows the time in hours of the growth of 2 species, species 1 and species 2. And this kind of graph is could be a scatter plot or a line graph, but here it's a scatter plot. This is useful. This also shows a change over time, but it's useful for having a larger sample size. So the result statements could be something like, species 1 has an exponential growth and surpasses species 2's population at 10.5 hours. So as you can see, the blue and red lines intersect at about 10.5 hours. And here's another table. This one compares different classes with the number of students. And this is a bar graph, since it compares frequencies of the different number of students for the classes. It's useful for showing categories and percentages. So an example interpretation would be, algebra and physics are the most popular subjects with 50 students, which compose about 10% of all students. So it's very easy to know the frequencies by looking at the graph, since the bars show the different amounts of students. And lastly, here's a smaller table with percentages of people. For this one, since it has percentages, a pie chart is useful for graphing this. It's also good for showing parts of a whole, since it's very easy to see from pi, and also binary data, which is yes and no data. So an interpretation for this would be 51% of people ranked the experience a 2 and below. And the most frequent response was 0 with 36%. And this type of graph, it's also easy to see the interpretation, since the bigger slices of pie tell you that it's more.
Just to quickly jump in here, great job, Anirudh. So this is not Anirudh's fault or anything. This is something we included in the slide just to have a point. So if you look at the bar chart, it says there's 2 English ones. So it's like, why are there 2 English ones? And if you go back onto the table, we have English language and English literature. But because of the way that Google Sheets is like, arranging these words, a lot of the full names is getting cut off. So instead of English language and English literature, you're just getting English English. So there's something to be careful for. Google Sheets does have like a magic button. You just highlight your data and you click the chart button and it'll create a chart. And it may look good, but make sure to inspect it carefully and make sure everything is how you want it. Because like if you have like data that's like bacteria 1, bacteria 2, and it gets truncated down to just bacteria, that's not good. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Okay, get back to it.
Okay, so there's other types of graphs. So if you think your data doesn't fit any of these graphs, feel free to ask us if there's other graphs you can try and use. So finding an average. So I'm pretty sure most people know how to do this, but to do a quick review, we would take the common mathematical values that most students use to summarize their data. So yeah, taking the class data, if we want to know the average number of students per subject, we take the sum of the number of students divided by the number of classes. So you add up 18 plus 21 plus 29, etc., all the values, and then we would divide by the total number of values. So we would divide by 12 because there's 12 classes. And then with a little math, we can find that there's an average of about 34 students per class. And then taking this data, now we want to find the percentage of the students in Spanish during the period that the survey was taken. Percent is the number of students we're interested in divided by the total number of students multiplied by 100%. We find that the 44 students in Spanish represent about 11% of all students during this period. During the breakout room, which we won't have, we would also go over how to calculate these in Excel and Google Sheets, but I think we're just doing those in the main meeting. So summarizing, reviewing, and interpreting our results. So in science, it's important to understand the difference between your results and your discussion, although they go hand in hand. Your results will be only the facts that describe your charts and will likely be describing numerical aspects of the data. In contrast, your discussion expands upon your results and interprets them in the context of your prior research and opinions. You can attempt to explain why something happened the way it did or what an outlier may mean. In addition, you should connect your results to your hypothesis and explain how it supports or rejects your initial predictions. Like we've been speaking about, your results are about identifying what's going on in the results. The following values, mean, median, mode, standard deviation, standard error, can be useful in summarizing a general trend. Remember to compare across trials for precision and contrast various conditions to investigate your hypothesis.
So I'm going to jump in here because someone wasn't able to make it. So next you want to review your data and look at the results and ask yourself, do you have enough data to draw certain conclusions? Like if you're doing a social like behavioral study and you only have 5 people in your study, do you think you can really confidently extend your conclusions to, the whole human population? Like these 5 people preferred bananas over strawberries. So that means all people prefer bananas over strawberries. And then what information does the data you collected tell you? Do you see any interesting trends or patterns? Patterns may not always just be it's like a super strong correlation. Sometimes a non-correlation can be interesting. Like you might observe that people's age does not correlate at all with their interests, and that could be something interesting. It doesn't always have to be like, oh, the person's age is directly correlated with their like of strawberries. Did you get the results you expected? Unexpected results can be really interesting as well. And try to figure out why. If you didn't see what you wanted, maybe milk was a better feed for water. Maybe milk made plants grow better than water. Now you're curious, like what? I thought plants couldn't drink milk or something like that. Okay, and then when you're summarizing your results for presenting to judges and the general public, you want to be very objective. You don't want to be like, I cured cancer with 100%. I have done this, I've done that. Cancer is no more, or whatever is no more. Be very objective. Say something like the experiment found that there was a 12% decrease in cancer cells in the plate treated with like molecule 1. And if anything happened that you don't expect, make sure to highlight it. Sometimes people think that if you have any results that don't directly support your hypothesis, it'll make your project look bad or it'll hurt your chances in the science fair for judging. No, judges actually love it when you like limit your own results, when you clarify something, when you acknowledge a limitation, because it shows that you're really taking the time and care as a scientist to do a proper research. And make sure to reference back to your data and calculations to support your claims. So for instance, these are some good sample statements. I'm not going to read them all out loud right now, but if you want to go back to the video, which will be posted on our YouTube, gsdsef, you can just go like skip through the video and just stay on this slide and check it out. But one of them is the difference between X and X was this, and then make sure to have the proper units. Units are really important. Don't just say like there were let's say the cancer cells had 13 more than the human cells or the normal cells. What is that? What does 13 mean? Okay. So for an example, a good statement would be the most frequent response for 35th grade students was 3 hours per day for TV viewing with an average of 2.8 hours. Look how this sentence gives you a lot of great information. It tells you how many people were studied, 30, what kind of people they were, 5th graders. The most frequent was 3 hours, and then the average was 2.8 hours. So these all give you the very information-packed statements that are also objective. It's not like, these kids are watching way too much TV. I can't believe they watch an average of 2.8 hours, with many watching 3 hours. These 30 kids are wasting all their time. Yeah. Okay, so that's it for this workshop. Well, we're going to do some live demos in Google Sheets, but our workshop will be about passing the next part of the screening process, and that will be on January 29 from 9:30 to 10 a.m. and we'll probably go over. Make sure to tell your friends. You can sign up through the same registration link as always, and please be sure to get your pre-screening and done by December 31st, so that you'll actually be able to participate in the fair. So now I'm going to stop sharing so Kavya can do the demo of the making graphs.
Okay, so
You should have co-host, I think.
Yeah. All right, can everyone see the Google Sheets? Yeah. Okay. So as we were all talking about in the slides, there's different ways to compile your data, and there's different types of graphs. So there's different softwares that you can use, or such as Google Sheets or Excel. And depending on what features do you want on your graph, you can use different ones. But for today, we'll be using Google Sheets. So the first step to do your data analysis is to put all of your data in like a table format in the Google Sheets. So what we recommend is doing the first column should be your independent variable. And then the next columns should be your like dependent or whatever you're measuring or changing. So for example, in this, it's seeing the temperature and the sales of these different desserts as compared to the temperature. So make sure whatever you want to have on your x-axis, you need to have it in that first column, because later on, I'll show you when we make the graphs, then it'll automatically input like the titles and units and stuff. So that's why it's important. So this is one example, and here are some other few examples of how you could input your data. Okay, so first to start off, select, highlight your entire, all of your columns. Make sure you start from the top left corner and then scroll down to the bottom and highlight, and then click Insert Chart. And then it pops up a line chart, which is the default one. But in this case, we will be using a line chart, but further along, I'll also show you how to do the other charts. But if you do want to change your chart type, you would click Chart Type and then see which chart you want. And there's like column charts, bar charts, pie charts, scatter plot, and things like that. First, this shows basically what's on the x-axis and what's on what's being graphed. And in this case, we have 3 different lines because we have like 3 different objects that we are looking at. Just to look at a graph on the overall, first Google puts like a key for each of your like series. And so you can see that blue is ice cream, red is hot cocoa, and yellow is cake. Okay, so that's it for the setup. Again, you can play around with all the settings depending on what you need, but you can like switch the rows and columns. In this case, we don't need that. So I'll keep it like that, or you can like treat labels as text and things like that. Again, play around with it, see what you do need and what you like, and yeah, that's up to you. So first, the chart style, it just gives you like aesthetics for the chart, for example, the background color, font, etc., etc. And then next, the chart axes and titles. So this is important because you need to make sure that your titles for each of your axes are correct, because that's one way you can depict what's the information in your table. So for title, you can either directly click here, or you can click chart title and then edit it here. Remember, your title should be descriptive and should tell what's going on in your graph. So in this case, we're looking at the effects of temperature on dessert sales. So yeah, and then again, you can also keep changing your fonts and title sizes and format that. And that would be the same way you format any like font stuff on Google Docs or Google Sheets. And then you can add a chart subtitle. Some people put their names here, but if there's any additional information that you might need to write, you can also put that in this chart subtitle. And then most importantly, the horizontal and vertical axes title. And so again, so here I would put temperature because that's what is being shown on the x-axis. And then on the vertical axis, I would put like cost or like profit, and make sure to put your units in dollars. Okay. So in terms of what type of lines you want on the graph, you can change that as well. If you want like a dashed line or change the colors for each line, you can do that. And then next there's like the key or the legend. And this is just positioning the key and stuff. And then this is specifically for scaling your axes. So if you want to have, for example, more lines between the graphs, if you want to show like by increasing by ones, like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you can edit that in the specific axes, like in these areas. And then you can also add more grid lines. So that's, I went more in depth for this one graph because you can do the same with different types of graphs. It would be the same thing. You would have your entire table in the Google Sheets, and then insert, you would select the entire thing, insert chart, and then for this time, instead of line chart, we want to do a scatter plot. This is a little bit different because obviously you're getting your data points shown, and you can also create like a line that connects all the data points. And then again, there's the axes titles, series, and then same formatting options that was in the previous one. And then for bar graphs, similar concept, select all of your data points, insert chart, and then column chart. And again, as Andrew was stating before, make sure you do either format the graph or change your like specific headers in order to make sure that your names are correct. And so in this case, I was able to zoom out and it included all of the names. But if you want to be more specific, then you should change the names beforehand. And then lastly, this is the pie charts. As we said before, it's useful for graphing the different percentages or like yes or no data. And so here you do insert chart and then pie chart. And then again, you can go in and change the title and the different headers for the different percentages. And also you can click on like the specific title and it should bring you up to wherever you need to edit. Okay. Yeah. If you guys have any questions, you can put it in the chat. And then again, we have videos on Excel, also on the YouTube channel, but yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Kavya. So do you mind pausing your screen sharing so I can launch mine? Great. Okay, now I'm going to go over some basic like statistics. So namely mean, median, etc., highest, lowest. So going back to this example data set that Kavya used in her example with ice cream, hot cocoa, and cake and temperature. So let's say we've collected this data and we want to observe the number of sales of these items as the temperature changes. And you can kind of see that when it's really cold, people don't buy a lot of ice cream, but when it's really hot, people buy a lot of ice cream. And the opposite is true for hot cocoa. And I don't know, I would probably eat the same amount of cake if it was cold or hot. I wouldn't be that affected. But you can't just put that on your poster, right? You don't just say, oh, the data looks like it looks like. And I personally would eat cake anytime. So you gotta kind of get the math out. So we can first take the average. So to do an average, it's really easy. You can double click on a box so the little cursor comes up, put it in equal sign. This tells Google Sheets that you're about to type in a formula. In this case, it actually is pre-filling it in for me, but in general, the way to calculate an average of certain data boxes in Google Sheets is to type in average, parentheses, and then you're going to select the area that you want to find the average of. So in this case, I want to start from box B2 and take the average all the way up to box B13. So you see it's literally highlighting that part in orange. So it's letting me see visually what I'm selecting. And make sure to close it off with an end parentheses. So that is 427.58. So regardless of the temperature, well, the average amount of ice cream purchased at all the temperatures is 427.58 units of ice cream. And instead of typing out the same thing for the other two, for hot cocoa and cake, I can actually just click on this one, drag on this little blue square in the bottom right, and drag it over, and it will actually automatically apply the formula to the other two boxes, adjusted for their ranges. Really useful. And if you want to get the highest sale, it's a similar thing. Type in equals and then max for maximum, and then the range over which you want to find the maximum. And then it tells you B2 to B13. So in this case, the highest sale of cake is only 470, but the highest sale of ice cream is 750, and for hot cocoa it's 742. So it seems like ice cream and hot cocoa can reach pretty high extremes, while cake only reaches so high of a sale. But interestingly, if you look at the lowest sales, which you get by using equals MIN, max and min, the lowest number for cake is a lot higher than the lowest numbers for ice cream and hot cocoa. So one thing we can look into is the average rate of change, or basically slope, of how many more units or less units are sold as a function of the temperature increasing. So like as the temperature increases, how does the sales of ice cream change? So in this case, you would do the sum of B2 to B13 over the sum of H2 to H13. So the sum of all these numbers over the sum of these numbers. And that's going to give you the average rate of change. So essentially, as temperature goes up by 1 degree Celsius, you sell 20 more units of ice cream. Meanwhile, this one is going to show the hot cocoa. Notice that the way the formula was calculated didn't account for the fact that hot cocoa is actually decreasing, so it should be negative, a negative rate of change. So as degree Celsius goes up by 1, hot cocoa goes down by 19.41. And finally, if we do the same thing for cake, we get 19.13. So cake has a relatively small rate of change. Actually, no, sorry, they're pretty much all the same. Okay, but we remember we were earlier talking about the fluctuations, like cake seems to fluctuate a lot less than the other two. We can actually quantify that by, taking the highest sales and lowest sales and subtracting them from each other. So for example, 750 minus 185 is 565. And the way I did that was just I typed in B16 minus B17. So that's going to give us the greatest difference. So the difference between the most sales and lowest sales. So ice cream only, cake only has a low sales of a difference of 130, which means that it doesn't change as much as the other two products when temperature changes. Okay. And the final thing you probably want to calculate sometimes is percent difference between two numbers. So in this case, the percent difference between ice cream and hot cocoa sales overall. So you take, you just do B15 minus C15 over B15 times 100. So B15 would, in this case, represent the average sales of ice cream. C15 would represent the average sales of hot cocoa. And B15, again, you're dividing by the total number of ice cream. So this tells you that hot cocoa's average sales are about 5% less than that of ice cream. Okay, well, that concludes our workshop for today. Let us know if you have any questions. We'll stay on here. And a reminder that the next workshop is on January 29. Please spread the word, fill out the Google form again, or if you're already registered you can pre-register for multiple, no need to do it again. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us, and we always love coming on here and sharing our passion for the science fair.